All right, Cleo, so you made a request for the animal we're going to do today. Which animal did you request?
Skunk!
So you requested skunks, and it's an interesting choice because skunks, well, do you remember what order of animals that skunks belong to?
Mammals?
Right, so skunks belong to the mammal order of vertebrates, of animals. And there are many different orders of mammals. We learned about some ungulates, which are hoofed animals. We learned about camels, and we learned about hippos. And we belong to a different order. We belong to the primate order. There's a lot of different orders. There's like more than 10 different orders. So we're going to move to a completely different order today that has a lot of different animals that you guys know really well. And that order is called Carnivora. And do you know what Carnivora means? Any idea what
Carnivores.
Carnivores. And what do carnivores do?
They eat plants? No.
No.
They eat plants and meat?
They eat meat. Remember, carne is Spanish for meat, right?
Do they only eat meat?
Well, so carnivores are distinguished from other mammals by their eating of meat, but they're not the only mammals that eat meat. And a lot of animals in the carnivora order stopped eating meat, or they eat very little meat and eat mostly plants and seeds and things like that. So things kind of change over millions of years. Remember that some ungulates ended up going back to the ocean and losing their hooves entirely, which are what? Whales, right? So just because something started out as an ungulate doesn't mean it still has hooves. Just because something started out as carnivora does not mean it still eats meat. And just because something started out as not being in carnivora doesn't mean it can't eat meat, just like humans. We are primates, but we eat meat. We are omnivores. We eat meat and vegetables. But the carnivora specifically refers to that order of animals that are more closely related than they are to other animals that eat meat. Now, the carnivora, hundreds or 100 million years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, split into two major groups. And one of those groups was called the feliniform, which means cat-like. The other major group was the caniform, which means dog-like. Now, just because they were in the cat-like side does not mean that we recognize them as being cats anymore. So a lot of animals we don't recognize as cats are actually cat-like carnivores. We're not going to talk about them now because we have enough to talk about, because the group we want to talk about is the Canoideae, which are the dog-like carnivores. And there are 4 major groups of those dog-like carnivores which are still living. There's a couple of other little random animals that fit in there, but there are 4 major groups. You have any idea what those might be?
Hyenas?
Hyenas are cat-like, believe it or not.
They look more like dogs.
So dogs, yeah, they look like dogs, but they just happened to evolve that way to look like dogs. But even though they look like dogs, this is how looking at bones, looking at DNA really unlocks mysteries that our eyes can trick us. So hyenas look like dogs, but they are cat-like carnivores. So any guess what one of the 4 groups of dog-like carnivores might be?
Wait, let us think.
Well, one of them's really obvious.
A skunk?
Well, a skunk belongs to one of those groups, okay? And that group is called the Musteloideae, okay? And that's a pretty big group. It has a lot of different animals, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. In fact, instead of just talking about skunks, we're going to talk about the whole Musteloideae suborder of carnivores, dog-like carnivores, because there's just not enough to say about skunks. So that's one group. Well, what else do you think is
Hounds.
dog-like?
Hounds are dog-like.
Hounds? Hounds are dogs, Cleo. So dogs, right? Dogs are one of the groups. And with dogs, you have wolves, coyotes, jackals, right? So what other animals can you think of that eat meat?
Me?
Meat, eat meat,
I can think
carnivores.
of a lot.
Okay, but they're not cat-like, so they're dog-like.
Aw.
That you might be afraid to run into in the
Lions?
forest. Lions are cats.
What are
No, deer do not eat meat. So another big group is the bears. And the last big group is seals and walruses. So seals and walruses are dog-like, even though
What?
they have no legs left. Just like whales went back to the water and were ungulates, seals and walruses went back to the water, but they were dog-like. They evolved from dog-like carnivores. So it's basically canines, which are like dogs and wolves, bears, and mustaloids, and the seal and walrus group. So those are the four major groups. So we're going to focus on the Mustaloidea, which also there are several different branches, several different families within that suborder of carnivores. And we're going to start with skunks. Skunks are what they call New World mammals. In other words, they were unknown in Europe, Africa, Asia. They are native to North and South America. So when Europeans first came to North and South America, they found a lot of new animals that had never been described before. And skunks were one of them. They were pretty amazed by skunks because they're a pretty unique animal, both in the way they look and in the way they stink. Okay.
They really stink when they're
So
scared.
skunks, one of the things that they prefer to eat, they love to eat bees out of beehives. They typically in the wild only live about a year or a little longer, although if you keep them in captivity and take care of them, they can actually live up to 10 years. They have very poor eyesight. And of course, the most thing that most people know about skunks more than anything else is they spray fluid from their backsides, which smells really bad. And they have that very special color with the black and white stripes. Now, do you know why skunks would want to have that color where all animals could
Camouflage?
recognize them?
No. Because then they can stink on them.
Well, they don't want to stink on them. They want the animals to recognize them, so they avoid them because it actually costs the skunk energy to spray. So it takes them a lot of energy to make the spray, and they only have enough spray for 9 or 10 sprays, and then they have to make more. So it's better for the skunk if other animals know how to avoid them and they never have to spray them at all. So let's watch a little video about amazing facts about skunks.
The colour of a skunk's coat can vary from black and white to cream, brown or grey. Skunks are famous for their ability to spray a liquid that smells extremely unpleasant. A skunk can spray its yellow liquid up to 15 feet away and hit a target. Skunks are not aggressive and they only spray in self-defense. They will always warn before spraying. They will turn their back to the target, hiss and stamp their feet. If the animal does not move, they will spray them. As a repellent technique, the spray is very effective. Predators will typically avoid skunks unless there is little food available. However, green-horned owls are the main predators of skunks, as owls, like most birds, have a poor sense of smell, which makes the skunk's repellent spray almost useless as a defense. The spray from the skunk does not hurt or damage animals. It only leaves the other animal feeling uncomfortable with the unpleasant smell. The smell can last for days or even weeks and is very difficult to get rid of. Skunks are omnivores. They mostly eat fruit, insects, worms, reptiles, and rodents. They are also predators of honeybees and will even attack their beehives. They are nocturnal, so they normally forage for food at night.
So now we're going to learn about skunk spray and what it is in skunk spray that makes it stink so bad.
why do skunks smell so bad? It all comes down to chemistry. By the way, this video will include slow motion footage of skunk anuses, so be warned. I'm Anna Rothschild, and this is Gross Science. There are a number of species of skunk in the world, but the most iconic has to be the striped skunk. That's the one that looks like Pepe Le Pew. It's all black, typically with one white line that usually splits into two on its back. And it can be found all over the United States, as well as northern Mexico and southern Canada. Its Latin name is Mephitis mephitis, which appropriately enough means something like foul stench or noxious vapor. Obviously, that's because the most defining character of skunks is their defensive spray, which can cause watery eyes, nausea, and leave you smelling terrible. The chemical makeup of the spray is different depending on the species, but all of them contain special types of compounds called thiols. Thiols, also known as mercaptans, are a type of chemical group made up of a sulfur and hydrogen atom bonded together, and they typically smell really strongly. There are actually 3 different thiols in striped skunk spray, and 2 of those are the main contributors to the awful odor. But 3 other molecules in the spray are what are called thioacetates. Those compounds don't have a strong scent, but they can easily become thiols when they're exposed to water. And that might explain why a pet that gets sprayed may start to smell skunky again after a bath. Now, skunk musk is produced by anal scent glands, which actually lots of mammals have, though most aren't quite this exciting. When a skunk sprays, nipple-like protrusions called papillae come out of the anus and squirt the musk at the target. The bad news is they can squirt a distance of about 10 feet and are uncannily good at hitting their mark. The good news is that skunks really don't want to spray unless they have to, and adults usually give warning signals beforehand. Striped skunks will hiss, stomp, and raise their tails before spraying, and spotted skunks will even do a handstand. But what should you do on the off chance that you wind up covered in musk? Well, definitely don't use tomato juice. That's just a myth. Instead, use something that converts the thiol into a different type of compound. Some scientists suggest using a mixture of dilute hydrogen peroxide, baking soda, and a little liquid soap, which will oxidize the thiol and turn it into a sulfonic acid. But be careful because it could dye your hair or pet fur. Anyway, despite their terrible reputation, some skunks have actually been domesticated, and people say they make really cute and affectionate pets. But if you do want a pet skunk, make sure you know how to take care of it and get one from a breeder. Grabbing one from the woods is not at all nice for the skunk, and it would probably let you know that by squirting you with an anal gland full of noxious musk. Ew.
The next kind of animal in the Musteloideae suborder, okay, is in a family called Procyon, and we know them as raccoons. And how do we always know how to recognize a raccoon? What do we know, right? What tells us right away that it's a raccoon?
It eats garbage.
Well, okay, it eats garbage, but when we see it in the forest, how do we know that we're looking at a raccoon? Because it has the bandit mask, right? The raccoons all look like they're wearing a mask over their eyes, and they look like a robber, like a bandit, and they have that personality as well. So that's how we recognize raccoons. Okay, so raccoons are omnivores, which mean that they eat meat and they eat plants and seeds and fruits. They are, again, special to North America. One of the most amazing things about raccoons, they're one of the few animals that has a thumb that's opposite from the fingers, like humans have. So they can open things that humans make to open themselves, like containers with caps and garbage cans, and even doors. And they're generally perceived as pests because they get into human stuff and they open garbage can lids and they make a big mess. So humans generally see them as pets, but of course, raccoons have been around before humans, and they're much more interesting than just how humans perceive them.
Raccoons are cute little animals that are mainly known for their black mask-like formation around the eyes. Scientists believe that this distinctive characteristic reduces glare and enhances the raccoon's nighttime vision. Raccoons are sometimes compared to masked bandits, and by coincidence, these animals truly live up to such a comparison because of their courageous and sly character. Unlike many animals that tend to be scared of people, raccoons are not afraid to climb into people's houses, go through their trash, and steal something to eat. But besides being fearless and brave around people, raccoons possess a wide array of many abilities that help them to survive in the wild. These animals have grayish-brown fur, almost 90% of which is made by a dense undercoat to protect the animal from the cold. These animals have very good vision and a very well-developed sense of smell, which is used to find food. With their extremely sensitive and dexterous front paws, raccoons can grasp and manipulate food or turn doorknobs and open jars. Their paws have thousands of tactile receptors, which come in handy when determining the properties of certain objects without even looking at them. Having raccoons as pets is a very popularly discussed topic, and while for some people having such a cute pet is a lifelong dream, zoologists strongly recommend to stay away from getting raccoons as pets, mainly because they are common carriers of diseases that can be deadly to humans.
Now, the last group from Mustelidae is actually got the largest and the most variety. Many different animals in this group, and they're called the mustelids. They're the ones that basically gave the Mustelidae their name, and the animals that are in that group, you've heard of weasels?
Yes.
Okay, so weasels, and then some others that you may have heard of from that group are otters, badgers,
Beavers?
wolverines. Beavers are not. Beavers are rodents, a whole different family of, a whole different order of mammals. Weasels, otters, badgers, ferrets, minks, wolverines, lots of other ones. But the main ones that most people know about are probably weasels, otters, and badgers. So let's look at the weasel family.
From what we've seen, they're up there with the top innovators in the animal kingdom.
It's almost as though you have an animal in liquid form.
They are essentially a super predator.
Okay, we're going to talk about otters. Have you guys seen otters before?
Yes. I believe. No, I've seen pictures.
Okay.
Me too.
You, I
I
think you
know.
guys have seen
Me
otters in
too.
the aquarium before.
Yeah, we had. There was a slide.
They're holding hands. Oh, look at that! Absolutely adorable.
That's some totes adorbs footage of sea otters holding hands at the Vancouver Aquarium.
But don't believe it for a second, those cute little faces belie a ruthless and bloodthirsty family.
Yes, we've all seen endless YouTube clips of sea otters holding hands, sea otters hugging, sea otters eating with their tiny little hands, and of course, sea otter babies, God help us.
Otter cuteness continues to take over vast stretches of the internet, and it even takes human form in the guise of thespian dreamboat Benedict Cumberbatch.
But guess what? It's all just a delicious PR campaign from one of the animal kingdom's most ferocious families, Mustelidae.
Yes, baby otters are cute. Our brains are hardwired to ooze over anything vaguely resembling a human infant, and yes, even adult sea otters have a sort of teddy bear charm to them, but they are stone-cold predators, gobbling up more than 100 different species of prey.
Now, you're probably familiar with notorious mustelids like the wolverine and the honey badger, but the whole family tree is a predatory rogues gallery.
First of all, there's the giant river otter. These 6-foot South American carnivores mostly prey on fish, but they've no qualms about eating an alligator or a crocodilian caiman alive.
They even eat piranhas, who have their own horror movie franchise, and yet how many river otter movies can you name?
And like their smaller cousin, the sea otter, they're not above lashing out at a human if threatened.
Meanwhile, the adorable-looking stoat, also a mustelid, ruthlessly hunts down rabbits 10 times its own size, approaching in a zigzagging dance of death that seems to mesmerize its prey. The rabbit eventually just gives up its life. It just sits there, and that's when the stoat leaps on its back and delivers a deadly neck bite.
Other mustelids pack additional weapons, like the striped polecat that emits a skunk-like chemical attack from its anus.
Meanwhile, the internet-famous honey badger can withstand machete blows with its tough skin, and its jaws are powerful enough to crack a tortoise shell.
And the wolverine? The stocky, muscular gobbler boasts a special sideways carrying molar for tearing frozen corpse meat and crushing bones.
Video, we're gonna watch how sea otters catch shellfish and open them. So that's it for the suborder Musteloideae, which include the skunks, raccoons, weasels, otters, badgers, wolverines. They are all dog-like carnivores from the Carnivora order, from the class of mammals, from the phylum of vertebrates, from the kingdom of animals. And that's it. See you next time.